Gear up as Cash Miller and the team of accomplished guests steer you on an enlightening voyage filled with valuable tips, fresh insights, and effective strategies. Welcome to Marketing Masters, the Agency Power Show.
Hello, everyone. This is Cash Miller. I'm the host of Marketing Masters and the CEO of Titan Digital. Today, we're going to get into the metrics behind display, like programmatic ads, Facebook ads, and stuff, and how you can really make adjustments and whatnot, what that information actually means. I've got Jeff Barger with me. He's with Marketing Bomb. Jeff, it's great to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Cash. Yeah, hey, thanks. Great to be here. A little bit about myself is I have been doing marketing for the last 15 years. I spent the majority of that in a corporate entity, mostly for a Verizon agency. And about 3 years ago, I said, hey, I want to get out of the corporate game and take what I've learned through this career and start Marketing Bomb, which, you know, our whole belief was there is so much wasted ad spend out there. How can I help businesses that really don't understand the ins and outs of the data get that part of it and fix that marketing for them? And that's really been my goal. So we've been running these last three, and it's been pretty fantastic.
Well, data in marketing is everything. It's how we make our adjustments. And when we're running campaigns and, for programmatic, for anything in social media and such, you've got, you're putting money behind these things. And, I tell people, like when we launch any kind of a campaign and such, it's the advertising spend. I mean, you're putting real money behind. Data is a bit tied to that money. The more money you spend, honestly, and we'll get I know whenever we talk with Google, the first thing that they say is, hey, raise your budget and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, now the advantage of higher budgets and whatnot is going to be that you get the data back quicker. You're going to be able to make adjustments quicker. These are things that really, can help. But, it's that data, and what we're getting into today is why that data really matters. And I like to talk about the adjustments we have to make. When we're analyzing it, what are we able to do? Because for the people we work with, business owners and stuff, the stuff that we're doing is not often understood. It's kind of behind the scenes. It can sometimes be difficult for us to explain. It's like, hey, this is what we're actually having to do. So I want to educate people today on what is going on when we're running paid campaigns and programmatic, and how we use that data to make our adjustments. So I want to get started right with that. So let's talk the broad overview. How does the data that we get back, and you can give some examples, how does that data that, like if we're running a Facebook campaign, we're running programmatic, like display ads, or if they're video and stuff, how does it help us do our jobs?
So I think a lot of it depends on how you've went ahead and set up your campaign. I mean, I have a stone cold belief, almost everything you should be doing, the results of conversion. Like, I don't know of a business that's like, man, we just love getting likes.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Almost like, you can't pay your bill with engagement. I'm like, hey, what did you get from a sale? What did you get from like a lead gen? What about donations? Even if you're a nonprofit, if you're not built to run a campaign that you can measure what your bottom line is, I do think some things are set up a little incorrectly, unless it's like that branding side to get the name out beginning. So like when I set a campaign, I look at like, all right, what's my conversion goal? Is it a lead form? Is it a phone call? And then I am looking at that custom conversion inside of Facebook or Google or even my programmatic buys. What was my cost to get that conversion? I think that's like the number one data point anyone can look at. And it's one of the first questions I ask if someone's like, hey, we've been working with an agency. Mm-hmm. We're not real happy. Can we talk to you? And I'm like, oh, what are you paying per lead? What are you paying per sale? And if they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, I think I know why you're unhappy.
Yeah, right. Because, conversion tracking is one of those, obviously it's the depending on what you do, it's the most important metric that we can possibly be looking at. If you want brand awareness, okay, we're not trying to, convert things. So like Coke doesn't track, conversions because they want, there's, you're not buying a bunch of cans of soda, online and stuff. But, if you are trying to drive leads and stuff, then that conversion, which is tracked through your website, through your phone calls and such, so that we can actually see what the result of the campaign is, because campaigns can be pretty broad. There's a lot of things that go into them, and you can be running multiple campaigns. So
and that's such the piece is I think like that's such a key component of data that comes back. That's easy, right? Just getting that from the platform and saying, hey, I want to set up. Even if you set up the campaign for just traffic, you can still see how many conversions you get from that campaign. And I really believe in taking it like a step further and like drilling down into the CRM side. And again, it depends on the business. This isn't Shopify or like a cart. But when you're getting that additional data back, like I love HubSpot. Like I'm always going to be a big fan because I get my original source, the drill downs, I know which keyword. And if you've set this up for like a funnel stage of like, well, where's my customer in the journey? If this is like a longer piece, you get an extra piece of data that you really get to look at and say like, okay, well, I know what it was to get a lead form submitted or a phone call. How many of those phone calls turned into something? Like, you can take that out of CallRail or if you're integrated with HubSpot. And then it's okay, well then, how long did they go? And then you really start to get your cost per keyword, the campaign. Like we can talk about the creative side of it too. And like, how you've structured those campaigns and figured out this is the one targeting men. This is the one targeting women. This is the persona I used here. Like, I feel like you can see so much down to the level of like, if I use the color blue and, this font scheme inside of this, I will always get a conversion for $25, as long as nothing crazy happens. And it's going to take 50 of these to become a sale. Like you can almost turn it into a machine that prints you money in the back room.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's interesting. The point you made is diving a little bit deeper if you're able to. And as a business owner, you can set up these things, to be able to do it for yourself. So you're not just tracking the conversion. You're saying, okay, the conversion is the lead that I received, but what happened to it after I received it? Did it actually convert? What was the value of it? So if you landed a new project, if you had a new, customer sign up, you added another subscription, to the services you offer, what did they actually do? And then you can start to judge the value, and that goes back to, okay, now you can relate it to whatever your advertising spend is as well, because like I say, the conversion says it cost me $100 or $20 or whatever to get the conversion. But you don't know that conversion resulted in a sale. So being able to hook up and systems like HubSpot and others, can start to track the value of them. And I think that's extremely important. And it's an often like missed thing, even amongst, agencies and stuff when they're giving back data, because the companies might not be prepared to be able to track that, down to that level. They might not have the proper CRM systems or whatever it may be, but it's really interesting, that you bring that up. So, if we go back to, the other way too, what are some of the other metrics, that you like to be able to check into and stuff, because when we're talking about converting, okay, well, it's the top line stuff that, leads to that conversion. So what are the things that you're really looking at?
I'm always going to look at the impression level first and like, hey, is this like getting out to a lot of people? Because I think it's easy to be like, oh, well, we've got a $20 CPA on this. And it's like, oh, well, how many? Just the one.
Yeah, right.
Like we only serve 50 impressions. And then I think click-through rate, like while it's not as key, and like those are two metrics, I almost have like a little personal thing is like early on, I felt like working with some agencies, they're like, oh, but look at your click-through rate. I think it's key because it tells you you're talking to the right audience. Like, hey, like you've hit a group. They're really interested in what you have to say. Either that or you've just written some amazing copy that's very broad appeal and maybe it's not specific enough. But I think looking at impression count, click-through rate, even cost per click, I mean, I've definitely done some programmatic buys where early on it's like, this looks great. And then it's like, oh man, the CPM on this is actually $99. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, like, what's the click? Like, is this a good click-through rate? What's the conversion rates on this? Like, and it's like, well, it's kind of middle of the road. I'm like, then these are just very expensive impressions that aren't doing anything special. You know, and I think those are all key metrics. Like, I mean, just those top lines that I think we all look at: cost per click, click-through rate.
Yeah, and most of the platforms, I mean, they all have, similar metrics. It doesn't matter whether it's Google, it's Facebook, if it's a programmatic one, it's going to show you the impressions, the clicks. They're going to mean different based on the platform, because there's a different expectation. Programmatic tends to drive up large impression counts versus what Google's going to get because, programmatic is I'm putting stuff in front of people. Google is I'm waiting for people to find me. Yeah. And same thing with, any kind of social media platform, whether it's Facebook or something else, they'll tend to have larger, impression counts and stuff. And the click-through rates can be much lower. So you do need to understand the differences and have a certain expectation depending on the platform you're on. Otherwise, you're going to, they're not apples to apples comparisons.
And I think intent is probably key as well, which is why like that metric question sort of can span a few different ways. Like, I look at a programmatic buy. I mean, I'm running a display campaign on Google right now that I've been as high as a 30% click-through rate, and I'm not talking search. And I'm like, you don't see this kind of thing often.
No, you don't.
Programmatic, it's like, oh man, if you're hitting 1%, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
and I'm like, hey, if you look at those two numbers, you're going to have a very different opinion of like what's successful. But a lot of the programmatic buy I do for one of my customers is it's retargeting because they're in a medical field and you can't do that on Facebook and Google. And I'm like, hey, these are people that are in your journey and like we're just trying to move them to the next step in the funnel with some additional education or, stories of former patients. That click through, while it won't be as high, is it's like, hey, but they're already engaged with you and we're just giving them some more information. It's a much smaller pool. So even then, like the platform and the intent and my purpose for that are so vastly different. I would never do a one-to-one comparison of like top of funnel metrics. And I think as a marketer, you really have to be so intentful with what everything is you're doing, and you can't judge apples to apples. I mean, this is apples and kiwis.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're not even close, and, with any platform, you have to understand that, what you mentioned in the intent, in some cases we're, getting in front of people that we think would have an interest, with programmatic and stuff. And we're using audiences and such to figure out who those people should be. Whereas, if you're on Google, it's going to be the reverse. They have an intent, they know what they want, and they're, you're trying to be in front of them because of the searches they do and such. And then Facebook, is sort of the same thing, but Facebook's even more of a crapshoot because, with their audiences and such, they're basing things on, profiles and whatnot that are within the platform. They've got a number of metrics. They've been pulling back a great deal on how we can target, audiences, which make it tougher. And programmatic, they haven't done as much of that. There's still a lot more options there. But there's certain things you can do that you can base it on, their history. I can put in lists of, website URLs and stuff that they've been visiting that, hey, if they went here, I want to target them because I have something similar or whatever, or it can be, searches that they've done online, but I wasn't in front of them with Google, but hey, I can still hit them with an ad. So it's like, you have to understand though, is like, with, anything programmatic or social, you get really high impression counts. I think one of the things programmatic that you always have to take really care, be really careful about is where you're showing up to. there are a lot. We do programmatic advertising, and apps are notorious, and it can really skewer your numbers, right? Because, I'm sure you've, cleaned out tons of apps, don't show here, 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 So let's talk about that for a second.
Google. Even in Google, the App Store I had a huge issue that it was a whole theme of, it was blood pressure apps.
Oh, yeah.
That I probably had 34 to 38 different blood pressure apps that the app was designed so poorly. They thought the ad was like, oh, if I call this number, I can get customer support because this app is so broken.
Yeah.
And my call center was getting all these calls, and they're trying to check my blood pressure. And then we had to go in one by one and say, please don't serve inside this app. And it was kind of a general clean out I had to do about every 3 months.
Yeah, we've always kept a permanent blacklist of things with our provider and stuff, that it's we do not want any single ad served on any of these platforms, period. And then you have to, and this is what people don't understand, there can be quite a bit of manual work. Because when we go through those and we continuously add to the blacklist of places, when we find something new because a new app comes out or whatever, we actually will take and search for the app on the Play Store so we can see what it does. And then we can also see how, because they'll put their screenshots, right? And you can see where the ads are probably going to show up because they have the clickbait style ads, where they're going to have a little banner ad at the bottom where you're going to mistakenly click it. But it will eat up your impressions, your budget and such. And, we'll focus primarily on ones where we see high impression counts, because if it's got, 20 or 50 or something, okay, it's not enough, we'll get to it eventually. But, we got to start with the things that can really chew up budget, and that's the thing people don't understand often with programmatic. It can be really great, but the problem is the apps are a great way to reach more people, but you have to clean them out. And Google, like you mentioned, because that ties into the Play Store as well. And I've run campaigns where we refuse to run it on the apps. We'll turn them off totally. Just because of how much trouble it is. And it's also based on the type of client, the type of business you have.
Yeah. And, back to metrics. And then, like you said, you get those false clicks. And I think sometimes you get this representation of impressions are good, clicks are good. And then I that's why I feel that CPA number is so key, because I'm like, but how much did we sell? How many conversions did I get? Because if everything in the front end you're telling me is golden, what is wrong with my back end number? And it just feels like I'm either getting bot clicks.
Yeah.
Or you're reaching the wrong people and the ad is misleading, or, to your point, it's like, oh, you actually can't exit out of this ad. You have to click it to get it off your screen.
Well, you mentioned an interesting thing that, the ad is misleading and stuff. So let's talk about the creative that goes into it, because you've got, you're tracking the metrics, and often we do, and I'll combine this as two questions, because we do A/B split testing and such. So, and for people who don't realize, it's run 2 ads against them, see which one performs better based on the metrics and such, drop the loser, probably create something else to run against it. And that can be just doing variations like add text. It could be the changing imagery, whatnot, so what's your approach a bit to that? Because, when you're doing split testing, what are you looking for? What's kind of your criteria for an ad to be dropped and then to have a challenge, a new challenger?
So I think I've done it so many different ways. Early on, I was working with a creative director who really was focused on this lifestyle image branding for the whole company. That was supposed to be marketing's new look. I was like, well, man, let's run it. Let's run it against some stuff, because I feel we've done really well with more of this animation style and video, and, just this kind of very upfront, here's our promotions and things like that. And I mean, we kept on running back-to-back split tests inside of Facebook. And I'm like, look, this lifestyle image thing's not working. 5 to 1 people are clicking on just promo. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't care that this guy's having fun. Tell me about the buy one, get one free. That's why I'm clicking your ad.
Yeah, I've talked with people, that make that same kind of a comparison, so sometimes it's numbers, it might be a discount or something, that gets the response versus, like you mentioned with a lifestyle. So, hey, you could be living this way, yada, yada. And, which one is the actual draw? Hey, it's buy one, get one. Okay. And you can see why the clicks would get driven up.
It was clicks, and then we were doing offline conversions. So then I'm uploading in the Facebook, and I'm like, look, like I've gotten 5 sales from like brand and about 400 from buy one, get one free. Like,
right.
This doesn't matter. And then I've done it a different way too, like not actually using the in-platform A/B test, like set it up, is I ran different sets of personas. That like for the group I was targeting, there was a high propensity for Caucasian males, African American males, and then, just women was sort of laid out as a whole. So we said, okay, like let's cast our 3 actors. We did a bunch of photography, and I set up the geography the same, headlines and everything else the same. And it was just the only difference were these personas. And I was such a pain about this. And I was like, hey, I need a dog in this picture. Our African-American guy had a dog. The woman has to have a dog because people love dogs, and that could throw this off.
Yeah.
So almost everything down to the detail was the same, except just the demographic of the person. And on Facebook, African-American persona just destroyed everything. It was like, clearly this guy is our winner. The female persona was dead last, like lowest amount of conversions, least amount of clicks, same impression threshold though. But then I went over to Google when I did the same thing on my display ads there. The woman was the leader, African American guys last, and then my Caucasian male was the middle throughout the entire thing. And it was like we ran very similar pieces of creative on both platforms, all the same personas. The platform alone changed who performed well. So it was sort of like, hey, you can't eliminate one of these the next round because they all perform differently. We're running these ads.
That's really an interesting thing, because it's the differences between them is the platforms themselves that they're running on. And, and with the platforms, of course, Facebook's closed. So it is strictly to people that are on there. And whereas Google, it's going to be, in various places, various websites and such, and it may or may not like match up, well, like you may be picking, to show ads based on content types and things like that, a number of things for a reason to be on that website, but it could still kind of, be off, in which case, it's can be harder to, I think, narrow down, like I say, why the ad would work. And like I say, that it's not one platform. You're running it through Google, but it's showing on essentially, what could be thousands or, even hundreds of thousands of websites and stuff, or more. So yeah, it would be hard on any kind of a split test, so you have to kind of treat each platform as its own thing. If you've got a winner on Facebook, it's different on Google. Okay, well, you run what is the winner on Facebook, and on Google, you do the same thing, but it's not necessarily going to be the same between them.
And then that sparked questions as we did a Hulu buy with those same commercials and ads and personas. And it was like, ooh, who do we pick?
Yeah, right. Because, especially since it's going to be, another closed platform if you're just using Hulu and such. And who did you end up picking, because like, that's really interesting. My inclination would be to maybe pick the person that won on Facebook because of the closed platform nature. But
so we did. I went with our African American male persona, and then the female persona was like, well, I feel like we've got to have both. And over time, it took almost a year, and we kept on changing out creative. Like we did plenty of stuff. We eventually saw his popularity rise back on Google, where he had been last. Over time, he did start to move upwards, and was like, it just took a minute to take a shine to him on this platform for whatever reason, but then he became the dominant figure there.
That's really interesting. So over time, because you let it run longer, so that begs the question though of how long do you think is a I guess, optimal amount of time for a test to go on, and it's going to be influenced by budget and data, so you can get data back.
I feel if you're not changing creative out every 4 months, that's the max. And I had all these charts and stuff. And I mean, we would do 4 months running the same ads. We might play around with some headlines and descriptions here and there. Just it's like, oh, this clearly is losing. Or, hey, you use these 5 images. We take one out that was underperforming. But every time I'd get to a 4-month breaker in engagements and conversions, that 4th month is when I would see the drop. And, we did that about 3 different times. And I'm like, look, we can't go any more than 4 months without switching out ad creative because people just get tired of seeing it. And not that like it was a lot of return customers, but I think it's like, oh, I've seen this a couple times and it becomes white noise.
Yeah. Yeah, like I say, we've got, ad blindness is what develops, especially on platforms like Facebook, because it's interjecting it into your feed, and the feed is a scroll. So as you go through, and this can happen on any other social media platform and stuff, you're going over and over again, and that's what happens. I've seen it. I tend to personally stay off of most of the social platforms, but YouTube. I'll be watching something on there, and they've copied TikTok's, the short form videos and stuff. And so you hit them in the scroll, and you have all those, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. And they can be kind of interesting because they're picking up on what you've been watching, offering you something similar and everything. But you can seen it. Like, and it kind of tries to feed you some of the same stuff, especially if it's ad related.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I get a lot of Verbo ads. I'm like,
Yeah, there's one Temu I'm getting constantly.
Oh yeah. That's
like,
a whole. They know what to serve me, and it's always cool stuff.
Yeah.
And then I read a whole article, and it's like, I mean, you'll get your stuff, but it's kind of a shady company that will sell your data.
Yeah, so they're
using. I'm on Facebook, so what do I know, right?
Yeah, right. So I think that's like, it is interesting that you do need to change that creative. If you don't, like I say, people develop blindness, and they may not have interacted. So you have to think of the creative. You're telling a story through that creative. Depending on what you're doing, even if it's buy one get one, you still develop a theme for that. I always think of was it Best Buy going out of business now? I've heard that they've it was Overstock, I think, bought them. They didn't buy. Really? Yeah, they didn't buy all the physical stores. They're going to let all that die, but they're going to change their Overstock name to Best Buy. So they're going to keep since they're an online brand, they're actually going to adopt Best Buys as their primary thing. Because their Overstock was always, over and all that. But the thing is that Best Buy was always known for like the blue cards, like the coupon codes and whatnot, they'd mail you and everything. But the idea is that, when you're running ads and stuff, even if you're running off of a theme like that, you're not really, you don't think of it as a story, but you become known for something, but you still have to tell it in different ways.
Yeah. It's, I think that's a thing too. And when you change your creative style, like we actually avoided like carousel ads in the first year. And I think it was just a lack of having the photography. I was like, carousel tells a story. It's interactive. Mm-hmm. And it really became, for one of the campaigns I ran, like, let's tell stories with these people. And I have 4 slides to really do it.
Yeah.
To like make you feel connected into something. And I think creative, is something that's just 4 images. The Sunday comics are 3 or 4 images, and they tell a story. Like, you can do something that really holds somebody's attention. But you have to tell a story. I think that's like what, like, I don't know, maybe the assumed marketing dream is we're like, oh, we're all storytellers. I feel like every PowerPoint I've ever put together, It's like, what's the story you're trying to tell? Like, well, we spent money and we made money, but I can add some flair to this.
Yeah. So your advertising can be, it can be used to tell a story, but, at the end of the day, it's the metrics behind, whatever you're running, you need to be looking at the conversions. You should look at the clicks, you should look at the impressions, but look at the sources too. Yeah, that's really important because you can end up with, really large impression counts and really large click-through, rates. But those clicks, if the sources are wrong, then the clicks are going to be wrong.
And in the attribution setting, I mean, man, if we really want to geek out on metrics, are you a first touch, a last touch,
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I get very frustrated. I use this analogy with my programmatic publisher all the time. I talk about first touch. I get frustrated. HubSpot wants you to always use first touch, and I'm like, I think that's weak, because I'm like, that's not what gets you over the finish line. Last touch to me is key. And we had some argumentative conversations early on about like, oh, our impressions are great, we're generating traffic, and I'm like, yeah, but you're not closing it. And it was like, well, the way we look at programmatic is X, Y, and Z, and how it assists. And I said, hey, if you and I went hunting, and you wing the deer in the knee, but I get it in the heart, which one of us is walking out with a deer?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I get the assist. But, in this game, when I'm looking at budgets and where we're going to invest dollars, it's who gets the kill shot, gets the money.
Right. Yeah. And like I say, a lot of times when we're split testing, we have to look at the top line, but also, because it is a full funnel piece. It's where are we sending them when it comes to ads, and making sure everything is in alignment. And if we see, because that data is also telling us, the idea is that it tells us what is good about a campaign, but also where the problems are within a campaign. If we see that, we could see that we get, we've got everything dialed in on impressions and clicks, but we can't get a conversion, and we think everything is right. And then you have to go look at where are we sending them? Is there a disconnect there? And, because you could have two campaigns that look like they're doing that. Neither one of them are really resulting, or one is getting a decent amount of conversions. Maybe it's something on the other end that we've got to take a look at.
And I mean, if you run a Facebook campaign and you're looking at that first touch attribution, and it looks like everything's Facebook, but it's the paid search after, it's like a week for whatever reason. It's like the Costanza, at the it's like, oh, I'll look at that later, and that search gets your conversion. Like, who are you going to give the credit to? Like, do you split it between them? And again, we go back to the CRM side of it. Do you want to look at all the different page views and UTMs for every customer that you've gotten and said, like, well, this wouldn't do this without the other? I mean, I think all those metrics are important, but at the end of the day, it's, what do you believe? And that the data tells you drove conversions to your business.
Yeah.
And I think it's last touch conversions, CPA. That's where your money belongs.
All right. So, to kind of sum everything up, when people are looking at, if they're diving in, hopefully, if you're a business owner, you're going to run ads, you should become at least some sort of data geek, because you need to know, where your money is going and how it's performing and whatnot. What would you give as a way to sum everything up of the key points?
So if you're looking at it, I mean, I would tell you, have the CRM in place. Like, if you are focused on lead generation and sales, I mean, you need a CRM that can track that deeper funnel for you. And if you have that data, I mean, take it into Facebook, use offline conversions if you're in a brick and mortar type of business. I mean, really analyze what drove that conversion, and then get the better understanding on. And I think we touched on it earlier, is if Facebook brought you 20 leads, how many leads did you actually close?
Yeah.
If paid search, you netted out 100 conversions last month, how many of those conversions turned into a sale? Like, I mean, you need to be really a CFO and a marketer, I think, combined.
Yeah.
To say, like, this is where the value in our marketing is going. So I do think it's get a CRM that does the job, drill down into that data as granular as you can go.
Yeah, the CRM, a lot of businesses are not, really prepared on the sales side of things, and they need to take that, yes, they sell. Okay. But the tracking part of it and combining it with your marketing efforts and looking at the data as a whole, because you can track it down and say, okay, because there's other things you can look at as far as, compare your conversions to your form submissions. If you've got call tracking data and stuff, you can see who's been doing these things. And then you can match them up with the actual sales that were, closed and know, okay, this one I can, definitely align with these conversions here and so on and so forth. And then it's also necessary because you see conversions on Facebook, you could have conversions on Google, you could have programmatic conversions, but you could find that even the platform itself, while you're getting conversions, does not close, and that can tell you too, so having everything in alignment.
And even little one-offs. I mean, be a detective. I mean, like sleuth your way around this is, Google will say, oh, we won't count it as a phone call conversion unless it's 60 seconds long or whatever you want to set it to. But then I've seen IVRs in businesses take 60 seconds to get through. And I'm like, well, everybody's going to look like a conversion that
yeah, right.
would have continued on.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. Jeff, how would people get a hold of you?
So my website, marketingbomb.net. I couldn't get the com. Or Jeff Barger at marketingbomb.net is probably the easiest way to reach out to me. I mean, and kind of like what I mentioned we do is like all this stuff is we focus on conversion tracking and getting attribution is, I think my original idea is how do I just become an attribution agency? Because tying the end pieces together seem to be the hardest part.
Yeah, it really is. But boy, that would be hyper-focused, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you, I think when I talk to somebody, that's truly what they need. I mean, we have to build everything to get them there.
Yeah.
But it's, hey, how do we find out if our marketing works?
Yeah. That's always the big question. Okay, well, I'm Cash Miller. I'm the host of Marketing Masters and the CEO of Titan Digital. It's been another great episode. Thank you for joining us today, Jeff. And that's a wrap.
Thanks.